You're still eating, continue to enjoy dinner, but we're gonna get the ball rolling tonight. It's an honor and pleasure to be here. My name is Tom Helmer. I'm the voice of Eastern Michigan football, but love baseball very much, and I've called play-by-play in the major leagues for the Colorado Rockies and the Boston Red Sox, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here with you guys today. We've got a packed house with family, friends, alumni, and supporters of the program. Thanks to you and all of your continued support and dedication to this program, an event like this is possible. Now, we have plenty in store for tonight. We'll hear from head coach Eric Ruth. We'll hear from athletic director Scott Weatherby. We'll be honoring this year's recipient of the Ron Ostrike Distinguished Alumnus Award. And then we'll hear from our keynote speaker, 1984 World Series champ, Lance Parrish. It's an honor to be here in front of you, the 6th annual Leadoff Dinner. This year's event is a special one for a number of reasons. We've received a tremendous amount of support from numerous table sponsors and program sponsors. In addition to everyone in attendance tonight, we have a number of families and individuals who are becoming part of the EMU baseball family this year. I speak on behalf of our student athletes and staff when I say thank you for all your continued support towards the baseball program. The players and coaching staff wanted to recognize our Eastern Michigan Baseball Diamond Club, whose continued support and donations have helped the program reach new heights. This fall, Diamond Club donations came in from dozens of members all across the country, and we were able to raise $15,000 to go towards helping all aspects of the program. So big hand for those donations. The team wanted to show their appreciation and provide an update video on how some of those dollars are being put to excellent use. Take a look at the video monitor.
This year, after talking to the staff, we decided that we wanted to look into a software system called Synergy. And Synergy is a video software system that will take our game footage, we'll cut it, we'll edit it, and we'll tag it based on the results of the play. So then we can go back as a staff internally and take a look at that 3-hour game in about 20 minutes or less. And then we can also use that footage for a variety of different situations and circumstances that come up throughout the course of the game. Use that for teaching, use that for coaching, and continue to build the program. We'll also have access to our opponent's video. So when we go in and play a 3-game set against a team we've never faced before, we'll be able to use Synergy as an opportunity to take that video and almost put together a little bit of a game plan, a scouting report on how we need to play these other teams. And this is something that we can add on top of Rapsodo to again get us to the point that we need to be.
That's awesome. As long as no one's banging on a trash can to enter change-ups, right? Then we're all good, right? All right. Thank you again to our EMU Baseball Diamond Club for their continued support. We also want to take the time to thank the parents who have helped with donations for the purchase of new baseball uniforms. Everyone's contributions went a long way towards upgrading the uniforms. We'd like to take this time to show everyone the team's reaction to seeing the uniforms for the first time.
The back. That's nice.
That's awesome. Yeah, they look great. All right, we'd like to take this time to recognize tonight's table sponsors. As I recognize each sponsor, please have one person from your group come up to the front of the stage to be presented with your special gift from the team. Tonight's table sponsors are the Feldman family. There we go. Jim and Diana Mulcahy. and Tomey Group, LLC. All right, let's have one more round of applause this evening for our table sponsors. We couldn't do it without them. All right, next we ask if there are any Eastern Michigan baseball alumni in attendance tonight to please stand. A very special thank you to each and every one of you for your never-ending support, dedication, and commitment to this program. Let's give a big round of applause to our EMU baseball alumni. All right, ladies and gentlemen, now it's time to have some fun. It's time to meet your 2020 Eastern Michigan Eagles baseball team. This is where I start getting the broadcasting voice going. You know, we get the intro music. We're going to start with your freshman class. From South Lyon, Michigan, number 24, Logan Bursick Harrington. From Portage, Michigan, number 9, Tyler Helgeson. From Okeana, Ohio, number 35, Trevor House. From Shelby Township, Michigan, number 20, Ryan Locks. From Howell, Michigan, number 22, Luke Russo. From Canton, Michigan, number 4, Anthony Sharpens. From Tecumseh, Michigan, number 6, Cameron Wagoner. Now for the sophomores, from Mason, Michigan, number 19, Lewis Fields. From Commerce Township, Michigan, number 21, Jack Duncan. From Mason, Ohio, number 17, Taylor Hopkins. From Zionsville, Indiana, number 6, Stephen Karras. And from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, number 30, Justin Mice. Now for our juniors. From Maineville, Ohio, a junior college transfer, number 34, Christian Bolt. From Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, number 40, Holden Cook. From Kalamazoo, Michigan, number 1, Shane Easter. From Cincinnati, Ohio, number 8, Eli Gora. From Northville, Michigan, number 25, Scott Granzono. From Saline, Michigan, number 18, John Holt. From Okeana, Ohio, number 43, Thomas House. From Battle Creek, Michigan, number 28, Nate Jones. From Springboro, Ohio, number 15, Jared Kaufman. From Shelby Township, Michigan, number 10, Luke McGuire. From Saline, Michigan, redshirt junior, number 16, Mike Monahan. From Knightstown, Indiana, redshirt junior, number 5, Drake Peggs. From Superior, Wisconsin, a junior college transfer, number 45, Justin Reinthal. From Temperance, Michigan, number 27, Dylan Schroeder. From Rochester Hills, Michigan, redshirt junior, number 7, Jeff Timko. From Leamington, Ontario, junior college transfer number 26, Daniel Workington. And finally, your 2020 senior class, from Warren, Michigan, redshirt senior number 3, Davis Feldman. From Commerce Township, Michigan, number 23, Devin Hager. From Corona, Michigan, redshirt senior number 31, Caleb Hester. From Battle Creek, Michigan, number 14, Nick Jones. From Geneva, Illinois, redshirt senior number 44, Nick Toretto. From Kingsville, Ontario, Canada, number 49, Brett Stenger. And our 35th and final member of this year's team, Bentley Booth. If you can now direct your attention to the video screen, we'd like to share a video from Bentley's signing day.
Carry yourself with pride, honor, respect, sportsmanship, and integrity that are expected when wearing the green and white. You should always remember to perform to your best of your ability in life, in the classroom, and in the community. As an Eastern Michigan athlete, you're responsible for participating in team activities, cheering on your fellow Eagles, and most importantly, having fun. So if you agree to those terms, Bentley, you can sign right there.
Ladies and gentlemen, one more time, give it up for your 2020 Eastern Michigan baseball team. All right, as they take their seats, I'd like to introduce now the head coach, Eastern Michigan baseball, Eric Roof.
What a difference a year makes. Last year I was coming off of meniscus surgery. I think I had to hobble my way up to the stage on crutches. So it feels a heck of a lot better this year. I think I was even referred to by some of our guys as called GIMP. So it's crazy how much a difference a year makes. Before I get started, I'd like to thank everyone for being here tonight. I know it may not seem like it with the weather outside, but baseball season is finally back. This Friday, we'll kick off our season. We'll head down to Tennessee, and we'll play Austin Peay. This event allows us to come together, kick off the season, and talk some baseball. As you can imagine, putting on an event like tonight, there's a lot of people that put their hard work to make an event like this possible, so I want to first off with some thank yous. First off, some thank yous to some people who couldn't make it, but I want to acknowledge their help from putting this event on. Special thank you to President Smith for stopping by earlier. He had to take off, but President Smith and his wife, Connie, are huge baseball fans. Specifically, they're huge Cincinnati Reds fans. And I know we have a bunch of guys on our team from the Cincinnati area, so thank you for President Smith and his wife, Connie, for stopping by. Our athletic director and vice president, Scott Weatherby, he's actually in a conference in California and couldn't make it. We'll get a chance to hear from him a little bit later. But another big baseball guy. He actually traveled with us down to San Antonio last year, stayed with the team, and cheered us on. So you'll see him a bunch this spring. And a fun fact about Scott, I'll talk about a little bit later, but Lance Parrish was his favorite player growing up. So a pretty cool tie into tonight as well. Kathy Steiner, Kathy's the one behind the scenes, putting on together this event, the venue, the lighting, the sound. So thank you, Kathy, for making tonight's event a reality. Finally, I'd like to thank our presenting corporate sponsor, Trinity Transportation, as well. Now for some people that are here, I'd like to have them stand up so I can introduce you to the crowd. First off, Andy Rowden. Andy's my direct boss, our sport AD. He's actually in his third year here at Eastern Michigan. A huge resource for me and the staff to be able to bounce off any ideas within the program. And lucky for me, his weather app works a heck of a lot better than my weather app, so we can finally get these games in the springtime. But thank you for being here, Andy. Dan McLean. Dan's in charge of our development team. He also helps organize alumni events like tonight, and he's one heck of a staff noonballer. So thank you for coming out, Dan. Tom Helmer. Yeah. Tom's obviously our MC for tonight and the voice of EMU football. He's come out a couple times now supporting the program, so thank you, Tom, for making it out as well. Bruce Dishnow. Bruce, like you mentioned earlier, works with Athletes in Action. He actually meets with the staff and the players individually to help grow their faith. And I really appreciate Bruce taking the time to help mold our guys and help grow them and lead them spiritually. So thank you for being here tonight and for all that you do. Greg Steiner, Alex Jewell, where are you? In the back. These are our media relations team. All the inside content of the program, all the access you get from the guys, the press releases, the social media posts, the videos, the graphics, it's all because of their hard work. I know our players love seeing it, our recruits love it, and the parents love to get a chance to see that inside access. So thank you guys for your hard work. Our table sponsors, I know you guys already came up to the stage, but if you guys could stand up as well. The Feldman family. Jim and Diana Molche. And Tomey Group, LLC. Thank you for your generous support of the program. You guys have always supported us, and we couldn't put on this event without the help of you guys, so thank you. In addition to those table sponsors, I want to thank the program sponsors and those who also sponsored a student-athlete meal. The next group, you guys don't have to stand up, but I'd like to thank the entire alumni base. The alumni base here at Eastern Michigan is very active alumni base. They're around our program a lot. I love it when they're around our guys. The more they can be around our guys, the better. This is and always will be your guys' home, so I appreciate you guys coming out. On top of those alums, members of the Diamond Club the Diamond Club team, I won't name them all, but guys like Brandon White, Scott Barrett, Jeff Fergalini, Sam Ott, Sean Harrington, Doug Martin, Joe Skager, Anthony Tomey, it's a long list, Gary Clark, and Jeff Harris. These are the guys that, again, were able to purchase that video, Synergy. We were able to raise almost $15,000 for Synergy, the recruiting software system that we have, as well as Rapsodo from last year. In addition to Synergy, We'll also upgrade those windscreens that were much needed at O-Strike, so thank you for your guys' help. Speaking of those videos, I also want to personally thank the parents from the bottom of my heart. You guys came to the staff last year and said, hey, I think our green jerseys could use an upgrade. So we said, all right, you know, we'd be interested. And they took the opportunity and they took that challenge of raising money for us to come up with some new uniforms. Our players were able to kind of design them and phase them. And as you can see, they're really sweet. So let me give it up to the parents for the uniforms as well. Next, I'd like to congratulate this year's Ron O-Strike Distinguished Alumnus, Bill Tuscany. Where you at, Bill? Stand up for us. Stand up. Bill spent over 30 years impacting our student athletes. A lot of the alums that are here tonight, he had them as well. He has some great Coach O-Strike stories and a bunch of those teams that he's been a part of. So thank you for being here tonight. Congratulations, and looking forward to hearing some more of those stories, Bill. My direct staff, Seth Ellenson. Where's Seth at? So Seth's our athletic trainer. He's in his first year at the program. He's coming to us for Southern Illinois. He's been a great addition to the staff. He's provided the care and the treatment that we need for our guys to stay healthy and be on the field. First thing you'll notice about Seth is his incredible size. So he's going to be the first guy off the bus this year. Next we have Seth Thompson. Seth couldn't make it here tonight. He actually works with the men's basketball team as well. He's our strength coach. Another tremendous hire to the program, but thank you, Seth, for all your work. Our managers, Charlie Richter. Charlie, where you at? Connor Hood. Andre Klein. Ryan Lechner. Addison France. Amir Amusami. These are the guys that do all the dirty work. You know, as you can imagine, our players, I want to make sure our players are going out there just worrying about class, worrying about practice, worrying about competing. These are the guys that put in the work to make sure their jobs are a lot easier. They're setting up field, they're moving screens, they're doing laundry. Heck, earlier this winter, we actually had them shovel snow off the field just so we could practice and be outside. So let's hear it up for the managers as well. My coaching staff, AJ Octor, go ahead and stand up for me, AJ. So AJ's actually in his third year with the program. He's a former Major League pitcher, current pitching coach, current recruiting coordinator, and most importantly, current girl dad. So let's hear it up for him. He and his wife, Katie, had their first child, Ruby, last May. And AJ's done a tremendous job of finding the best players around and getting them to come here. So AJ, thank you for your tireless work and everything that you've done. Jonathan Roof. Jonathan's in his second year with the program. He works with our infielders and our hitters. Some say we look alike, which is extremely unfortunate for him. Another person on the staff who doesn't stop working. He legitimately spent the night at the office last night because we had practice early this morning. So just another tireless worker doing everything he can to make sure our guys will have success on their field. So Jonathan, thank you for everything that you're doing. Corey Mee. Coach Mee's in his first year with the program. He works with our catchers and our hitters, and he'll also be our bench coach this year. He's coming to us from Toledo. where he was the head coach for 16 years and has spent over 30 years at the Division I level. His wealth of knowledge for the game, the Division I level, and our conference is unbelievable. We're extremely lucky to have him. I know the staff picks his brain all the time about a variety of different things. Fun fact about Coach Me, he was actually a switch hitter as a player, so he can actually hit fungos left-handed and right-handed, and not only can he do that, he can throw BP right-handed and left-handed. So let's hear it up again for Coach Me. Finally, I want to give a big thank you to tonight's keynote speaker, Lance Parrish. Lance is currently a special assistant to the GM for the Detroit Tigers. We all know his accomplishments as a player, playing 19 years in the big leagues, 8-time All-Star, 3-time Gold Glove, 6-time Silver Slugger, and the cleanup hitter of the 1984 World Champions Detroit Tigers. So let's hear it up again for Lance. So again, thank you for taking your time out of your busy schedule to come up here and speak at tonight's event. When we talk about this year's team, a lot of times I get the question, what's different about this year's team? What's different about this group? And honestly, it's night and day. First, we have a completely different team. You got a completely different team with a completely different group. You got 10 new guys, 24 returning guys that are at different phases now than they were last year. On top of those new players, you also have 3 new staff members. So the dynamic of the team is different. On top of the dynamic of the team being different, there's also some visual differences. The first visual difference, and we saw a little bit of it last year, is the new Student Athlete Performance Center. This $20 million 2-story building is over 63,000 square feet, and it sits between the baseball field and the football stadium. Our guys have the privilege to work out there and get treatment. We got plenty of space in there to get the work that we need to. The weight room is gorgeous, 7,000 square feet. And inside the weight room, there's also a nutrition center. Our guys are able to go over there and get 3 meals a day, 3 snacks a day inside that nutrition station. So just to be able to have the new weight room there, and then also you have sports medicine right above. So you have the weight room, nutrition, sports med, the locker room, the field, and the bubble all right beside each other. Another cool advantage of that new championship building is our staff were able to switch offices. We moved offices from Bowen Fieldhouse to the Convocation Center. And with that change, I was lucky enough to get the corner office. That corner office is the same office that Coach Creighton had. So this allows us to have staff meetings, player meetings, recruiting meetings, diamond talks, all in that new space, ultimately allowing us to get closer to the field and closer with our guys. And that's the thing that's the most fun about this year's group. Making that transition over to the new offices allows us to be right beside them. We're more centrally located, and I get to see how they're doing off the field, not just the stuff on the field when we're practicing. I get to interact with them on a personal level. I get to see how their day is going, how they're doing personally, how things are at home. You get to build relationships that are stronger because you have those personal connections. And those personal relationships that you have evolve. Just because you had a strong relationship in the recruiting process doesn't mean that it's going to be a strong relationship when they're here. So those relationships take time and effort. And being around them as much as we are, they can see how much we care and how much we love them. And that care and love starts with them as a person before as a player. On the field, we'll get the reps we need. Off the field, we'll be around them. But they're able to see us working with them on that personal relationship that helps magnify that trust that we have within each other. And that trust was actually confirmed earlier this winter. I mentioned the baseball offices slid over to the Convocation Center. And with those new offices, I have a front row view of O-Strike Stadium. Earlier this winter is on Monday, January 13th, the night of the national championship game for football. It's an off day for our guys. It's 6 p.m. I'm in the office, knocking out some stuff for the season, knocking out some stuff for practice, and all of a sudden, I see O-Strike's lights flip on. It was our guys out there on Monday, January 13th, 37 degrees, getting additional swings in. And that right there, I just sat back like a proud parent, just enjoying it, watching these guys, how hungry they were to get those swings in. When you see them continue to put that work in, it obviously shows how much they care. And the care that they have is going to be something that's going to continue into the season and continue to make us stronger for the season. They're getting those swings in again because they're caring, they're passionate to get better. Not because a coach told them to, not because someone thought that maybe somebody was watching them, but they were getting those reps in because they wanted to improve. And again, I was just so excited to see that. And when you're able to see that, that magnifies that trust within our program. Again, that's the night of the national championship game. There's probably a million things they could have been doing, but they were out there getting those additional reps. And that right there is our standard. That right there, seeing them going out there above and beyond the call of duty was the standard. And that standard is going to give us the preparation that will lead to success this spring. I've already seen success multiple times this year from our guys. Earlier this year, I got the grades back from the first semester. And come to no surprise, our guys killed it. We set another program record for highest GPA in team history. So let's hear that for the guys. It was a fall team GPA of a 3.517. "34 players, and the average GPA was over a 3.5. It's incredible. You'll never see anything like that. On top of the success they've had in the classroom, our guys are continuing to serve and give back in the community. We've accounted for over 540 hours of community service. 540 hours. Just to put that into perspective a little bit, 540 hours is over 15 hours per guy. Per guy, and we're barely halfway done with the academic year. So you add up the new players and staff in the program, the returning guys who have grown, the new student performance center, those new offices, those evolving relationships that are based on care and love that starts with the person before the player. Then you pick up a mid-season MVP like Bentley Booth. Bentley, stand up for me, good guy. Bentley is what brings it all together, and he's our difference maker. You saw it in the video a little bit earlier before, but we joined up with Team Impact. Team Impact is a nonprofit organization that connects children battling chronic diseases with local sports teams. Benny's 9 years old, comes to us from Belleville. He suffers from short bowel syndrome. It's a condition where he misses nearly his entire small intestines. He's constantly in and out of the hospital, constantly getting treatment, constantly missing school. But Bentley's a fighter. He's tough. He won't let that get him down. He's been on campus multiple times, and I don't think he stopped smiling this whole time. He's got a smile that lights up a room, and it just makes you want to smile. He signed his letter of intent a couple weeks ago, and he's officially a member of our program. He's the exact guy we want in our program. So Bentley, thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for us allowing to impact you, but more importantly, thank you for impacting us. So let's hear it up for Bentley again. Like I mentioned earlier, I love what we've been doing since school started in September. We're 14 practices in to our preseason, and we got 4 more practices left before our first game. I love this group of guys. I love being around them, and it's a privilege to be able to coach them. This Thursday, we'll take off for Austin Peay. Some of those other spring trips, I know our poster's out front, but some of those other spring trips will include a trip to Florida for spring break. We'll play Pittsburgh, down in Sanford. We'll play Florida Gulf Coast midweek, and then we'll wrap up spring break with our Port Charlotte series with St. Louis, Villanova, and 2 games against Northeastern. We got a couple other series against Cincinnati, Kansas State, Southern Illinois, and then our home opener will actually be March 17th against Findlay. So it's just right around the corner. Conference play opens up March 27th, and that's against Ohio. We're at Ohio that weekend. And something new to the conference this year, Akron is back in the conference. They were out of the conference for a couple years. Now they're back in it, which gives 11 teams in the MAC, and we have 9 conference weekends. So you play the 9 conference weekends. There's a 3-game series. So it means we miss out on 2 teams this year, and those 2 teams are Kent State and Miami. This is my 6th year here. I think it's our 6th different schedule change, so it definitely keeps you on your toes. This year also, with the change from Akron coming into the conference, you're still at 6 out of the 11 teams are making the MAC tournament. The MAC tournament, again, is back in Avon this year, and we're looking forward to get back to Avon and taking care of some unfinished business. But thanks again for coming out tonight. Thank you for your support of the program. I can't wait to see y'all at O-Strike later this spring. Thanks, and go Eagles.
Thank you, Coach. The Ron Ostrike Distinguished Alumnus Award is presented each year to an alumni of our beloved baseball program, a deserving individual whose involvement and dedication to EMU baseball still thrives even though their playing days are behind them. This year's recipient is a 1973 graduate of Eastern Michigan. He's been a constant fixture on the pool deck, track, and training room since the fall of 1986. He has worked with 105 Mid-American Conference championship teams, as well as with scores of Olympians, national champions, and All-Americans. He was promoted to Associate Head Athletic Trainer in September of 2001, and on March 28, 2018, retired after 32 years of service to Eastern Michigan.
Our correspondent Parrish, Junior is here this morning with a story about the testing and marketing of sports equipment. A story that may raise as many questions as it answers. Joe, good morning.
Good morning, Brian. You know, around the country, a lot of youngsters are playing ball. You know that, and I know that. It's that time of year. And on some fields, kids are really using equipment that their parents have been told is safer, but maybe it isn't. And on these same fields, they could be using equipment that prevents injuries, and they aren't. It all boils down to testing. Independent testing is what we need. Million Americans participate in organized softball every year. When injuries occur, 71% of them result from sliding into a base. Some orthopedic surgeons in Michigan decided there had to be a way to prevent some of these injuries. Here it is, this breakaway base. Their research using the fields at the University of Michigan led to the conclusion that using this base could prevent 1.7 million injuries and save $2 billion in health costs every year. And think what money Major League owners could save. Remember Chris Sable opening day this year? Bill, is the breakaway base there to erase mistakes in judgment?
It's not going to erase them, but it's going to minimize the consequences of those mistakes physically. And any athlete, no matter how well they're coached, any individual is occasionally going to make a mistake, and that's what that's there for.
Ladies and gentlemen, give a warm welcome to our 2020 Distinguished Alumni Award winner, Bill Tuscany.
very much. When Coach Roof called me, told me about this, I was shocked because take a look. No way. Harv's Hardware and Frank's about 60 years ago. I was very honored, and I'm really humbled by this whole phenomenon. Certainly, being part of this program has been a big, big part of my life. Ron Ostrike helped me get my first job. In fact, he was instrumental. I was finishing graduate school in 1976, and after 6 years of college, it was somewhat imperative that I got a job. I had to borrow some money from some Italians. I called them Mom and Dad, and there was some pressure on me to find a job. And we were getting late July here, and I still hadn't found a job. I finished my degree in April. Coach O was aware of a job at Lewis University, with whom we'd had a long-time rivalry back in the NAIA days, and he was friends with the coaches. Well, it so happened that the baseball coach was also the athletic director, and they were looking for somebody to start an athletic training program there, somebody that would be involved in baseball, and they were having a tough time finding anybody at that point. With Gary Strickland's advice, Coach Ostrike made a phone call, put me on the phone with the athletic director right away. A few days later, I had an interview, and a day after that, I had a job. So I have a history, and this means a lot to me, with Coach Ostrike's name on it. It's very important to me. A lot of people have talked about being dedicated. I've told my students over and over again that that probably wasn't true. I tried to have fun, and I think that's what we should do in all athletics. And that doesn't mean you can't work hard at having fun. I've seen a number of people do that in different realms, but on the field especially, it's very important. And that has been a big part of my philosophy of life. The most rewarding part of this, though, has been the friends I've made coming here, especially seeing the alumni, knowing so many of you guys for so long now, seeing you with your own families, seeing some of you being challenged by some of your kids, which I get a kick out of, and some of the things you do, and then listening to some of your frustrations when you talk about so many of you are coaching at some level, and talking about coaching, and I always kind of get a kick out of it now that you're on the other side of things from playing and listening to that. And that's probably been the most rewarding thing. I'm extremely grateful. I've been extremely lucky. I've had good mentors. Gary Strickland, who I mentioned, was instrumental in my career all the way through. Dr. Rozier, who many of you knew, was also very important to my career. And like I said, really, the basis, my start was because of Coach Ostrike. And so, yeah, I've got a lifetime commitment to this program, and I've been extremely lucky. That's all I can say, and I'm very, very grateful. Thank you so much.
Another round of applause for Bill Tuscany. I think they want to get a picture with you with the jersey. All right, ladies and gentlemen, if you'll please turn your attention to the screens behind the stage as we introduce Scott Weatherby.
Good evening. Welcome to the 2020 Leadoff Dinner. I want to thank everybody that is in attendance today, our student athletes and our parents and all of our alumni and our fans, baseball fans. I'm sorry I can't make it. I had to be in California, so I'm on a plane right now, and I hope everybody has a great time. The Leadoff Dinner is one of my favorites events of the year, and the last few years we've had Kurt Gibson and Willie Horton, and then this year we got Lance Parrish. And for those of you that know me, I'm a huge Tigers fan, and
Certainly love my '84 Tigers, and Lance Parrish is somebody that I looked up to, so I want to thank Lance for joining us tonight and being our guest and speaking to our student athletes and to our fans, and it means a lot to us. And you know, one of my stories about Lance Parrish is I remember in those early years in the '80s when all of a sudden Lance Parrish came out with the black glove with what I called lipstick on the glove. And I'm like, what is he doing? And then after he did it, I'm like, come on, Dad, I need one of those too. And so I had to go out and get my Lance Parrish catcher's mitt. And so those are the things that I remember, and going to Tiger Stadium and seeing Lance. So I'm just real appreciative of Mr. Parrish making it to our event tonight. I also want to thank the Diamond Club for helping us put this on, and just all the support that our former baseball players have given to this program. And I'm excited about the upcoming season. And I would be remiss, though, if I didn't at least mention that, you know, a lot of you know I grew up in Kalamazoo and had a little crosstown rival by the name of Derek Jeter, and I got to play a little summer ball with him. And so I want to do a quick little shout out to him for getting in the Hall of Fame on the first ballot. And I'm amazed it wasn't unanimous, but there's always that one person out there. But I'm excited for him, and hopefully they'll share the picture of him and I back in 1992, the day before he signed. I was real excited for Derek, and really proud of everything he's accomplished. But I'm looking forward to a great year with our baseball team. Excited to see these guys work, and you know, I know our pitching's getting healthier, and just a lot of really good things and good momentum. They are champions in the classroom. They had a great year in the classroom. They've done an awesome job getting out in our community and our community service hours. Just really proud of them, and usually that's a pretty good reflection of what happens on the field of competition. So I'm looking forward to it. I hope everybody has a great night. I'm sorry again that I couldn't be there, but enjoy the evening, and go Eagles.
Scott Weatherby. I too grew up a Lance Parrish fan. I grew up just down the road in Saline, Michigan, and unfortunately I wasn't blessed with the athletic ability that Lance Parrish was. But I still wanted to be a catcher, and the summer of my sophomore year, some guys that did play baseball asked if I would play on their American Legion team. And I said, yeah, I'll do it. And I could play catcher because I've been watching Lance Parrish on TV. They go, oh, you can play catcher because none of us want to catch in the summer in Michigan. So they said, we're all going to put nicknames on our jersey. I said, all right, you can put Big Wheel on mine, or Little Wheel, or Spare Tire, but something to that effect, because I want to be like Lance Parrish. The problem was I wasn't there when they actually selected the names, so my friends picked the name for me. And as the names came out, guys had names like Godfather, Psycho, Killer, and I was excited because I knew mine was coming, and they pulled it out, and it said Gizmo. That was the little guy from Gremlins, the little furry thing. That was about it for my baseball career. But as for Lance Parrish, he is a legend. Played 19 years in the majors, was drafted in the first round, 16th overall pick in the 1974 amateur draft. He was an 8-time All-Star, a 6-time Silver Slugger, a 3-time Gold Glove winner, and he was on the 1984 World Championship Detroit Tigers baseball team. Everybody, Big Wheel, Lance Parrish.
Well, good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. Always nice to be a part of a function regarding the game that I love, still am involved in. You know, funny thing, when I was watching the video, excuse me, of whoever it was sliding into that base, it kind of reminded me of Kirk Gibson when he first came up. And I thought that Gibby was never going to last very long because that's the way he used to slide into bags early in his career. And I thought for sure he was going to tear his knee apart someday, and that was going to be the end of it. But he went on to have a pretty good career, and finally learned how to start his slide a little bit earlier rather than right on top of the bag. But I do recall him sliding into second base a couple times, and tearing the bag out of the ground and him jumping around and hold on. I said, man, not going to last very long. But I do love Gibby, just so you know. Just as a side note, I know he spoke here a couple years ago. The single most competitive guy I've ever been around. Good fortune to be able to play with him. Just an unbelievable competitor. And, to play alongside somebody like that every night, just kind of lights a fire under the rest of us. So I give him a lot of credit for a lot of the success that we had. I wanted to start this out with a story. Being a catcher, I can't tell you how many times people have asked me, when I go out to the mound, what do you guys talk about when you go out there? What do you talk to Jack about? What do you talk to the pitchers about? What do the coaches say when they come out there? And in reality, it could be from anything to anything. You know what I mean? The object is to try to relieve a little tension from our pitcher, to give him a blow if need be. Just, allow him the opportunity really to regroup. But when I was a coach on Alan Trammell's staff back in 2003, 4, and 5, Alan's pitching coach was a guy by the name of Bob Cluck. Bob Cluck was from San Diego, had a baseball camp alongside of Tram out there for a number of years, was also involved in professional baseball for a number of years, and in the early 90s, he was the pitching coach for the Houston Astros. And he tells a story that they were playing a series in Cincinnati at Old Riverfront Stadium, and about the 5th inning, Art Howe was the manager back then, and about the 5th inning, Mark Portugal at the time, who was the ace of their staff, was mowing through the Cincinnati Reds. I think the game was scoreless. And, in the bottom of the 5th or 6th inning, leadoff guy gets up and he throws first or second pitch, and boom, he hits a home run. So back then, about that time, was when they start shooting fireworks off when guys hit home runs. So guy hits a home run, he's running around the bases, and behind the stadium, you could see the fireworks and hear them going off. Boom, 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 boom. And Mark Portugal's a little upset. He's kind of pacing around the mound while the guy's circling the bases. So he gets back on the mound, the next guy gets up, the very next pitch, boom, he hits a home run. Fireworks are going off in the outfield, and the guy's running around the bases. Now you can tell that Mark Portugal's getting a little more visibly irritated. And lo and behold, the next guy gets up, and on the very next pitch, boom, he hits a home run. Back-to-back-to-back home runs. He's running around the bases, the fireworks are going off, boom, 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 boom. And now Mark Portugal's beside himself. You can definitely tell he's visibly irritated out on the mound. So Art Howe looks over at Clucky, and he says, go out and talk to him. Clucky goes, what? Go out and talk to him. He goes, what do you want me to say to him? He goes, you know that he doesn't want anybody to ever come out there. He goes, look, just go out and talk to him, try to give him a blow, think of something. I don't know what you're going to say, but just think of something on your way out there. So he's like, oh my gosh. So he starts walking out to the mound. He calls timeout, and he walks out to the mound, and he goes, I didn't look up. He goes, I could feel Mark burning holes in me as I'm walking out to the mound. So he says, I walk out, and back then when, in the National League anyway, when pitching coach or the manager came out to the mound, all the infielders came to the mound. So all the infielders come to the mound, and Clucky's walking out there, and he's trying to figure out what he's going to say. And as soon as he gets out there, Mark looks at him and says, you're not taking me out of this game. He goes, this is my game. And he goes, and that's the final word. So Clucky looks at him and goes, hey. He goes, easy. He goes, I'm not going to take you out of the game. He goes, I can't take you out of the game anyway. He goes, you're the ace of our staff. He goes, I have no doubt that you're going to turn things around. He goes, everything's going to be fine. We're going to score some runs. We're going to come back and beat these guys. He says, the reality of it is somebody called up from the press box and asked if we could come out here and kill a little time while they reloaded the fireworks machine out in center field. So everybody starts laughing out on the mound, and Clucky just turns around and starts walking off. Even Mark Portugal, got a smile on his face. So when he got back in the dugout, Art looked at him and says, what'd you say to him? And he goes, I'll tell you later. But those are the kind of things that when you're out on the mound, especially for a catcher, I can't tell you how many times I would come in the dugout and Sparky would say, you know, you need to go out in situations and talk to the pitcher. I go, they don't want me out there. And he goes, look, it's all part of the deal. You know, and from early on when I was catching, he said, you have to find the right times to go out there and give a guy a chance to regroup or catch his breath or whatever. He goes, you just have to do it. So obviously that became a part of my gig from then on, even though I know guys didn't want me out there. You know what, I was a #1 pick in 1974. I was a little disappointed that I was drafted by the Tigers. Back then, I was a Southern California guy, okay? I grew up out there. I had just recently had a tryout with the California Angels. I wanted in the worst way to be drafted by the Angels and play for the Angels. My high school baseball coach pulled me out of one of my classes when the draft was completed, or actually when they had announced my name. And he said, congratulations. He goes, you are the #1 pick of the Detroit Tigers. And I was like, the Detroit Tigers? You know, I couldn't tell you one guy that was on the Detroit Tigers. I didn't know anything about the Detroit Tigers. I'm not so sure I even knew where Detroit was, living in Southern California. But as things worked out, I had an opportunity to possibly go to college and play football and baseball. Ironically, I had signed a letter of intent to go to UCLA. And you know, I'll be honest with you, it was close to home. I did not want to leave the state. Beautiful school. Dick Vermeil was the head football coach. I wanted to play football. They had just brought a new baseball coach over from UC Irvine. So I was ready to go. And then the Tigers drafted me. But I found out when I got with the Tigers, you know, some time into it, that Alan Trammell had actually signed a letter of intent to go to UCLA 2 years after I had signed to go there. And we both were drafted by the Tigers, and we both ended up signing with the Tigers. So it's ironic that we could have been teammates at UCLA, but we both ended up being teammates on the Detroit Tigers. In fact, when he was drafted in 1976, he was tearing up the Appalachian League in Bristol, Virginia, and I was in AA Montgomery. He was having a really good year, and towards the end of the year, we needed a second baseman, and we were in the hunt for you know, our division title and possibly get into the playoffs, and they brought Tram up. And he did a phenomenal job, obviously. You know, just a great baseball player. I refer to him like some guys call guys gym rats that play basketball all the time. He's a baseball rat. I mean, he's just one of those guys that eats, sleeps, and drinks baseball. And if there was ever a guy that I was pulling for, and if there was ever a guy that I was almost convinced should be in the Hall of Fame, it was Alan Trammell. And I was extremely excited, finally, that some players from our '84 team, Jack and Tram, were able to make it into the Hall of Fame. So, being a part of the rookie Tiger team in Bristol, Virginia, when I was there in 1974, I played there with a guy by the name of Mark Fidrich, who you all know as the Bird. The Bird was no different back then when he played in the big leagues. Just a happy-go-lucky guy, loved the game, loved to compete, fun to be around. And you know, I looked up their numbers, looked up our numbers. Mark Fidrich was 3-0 with a 2.38 ERA in Bristol, Virginia, which was pretty good. We had a guy on our team by the name of Bob Sykes, left-handed pitcher, that was 11-0 with a 1.07 ERA that year. And the reason I bring that up is because the Bristol Tigers that year, you know, we play a 70-game schedule. It starts in mid-June and runs till the end of the season. It's the equivalent of a short season team nowadays. We had one game that was rained out that we never made up, so we only played 69 games. We were 52-17 that year, which is pretty phenomenal. I think they had a vote not too long ago where they voted the people of Virginia voted on who they thought was the best team to ever come through there, and they voted our team as the top team. You know, we only had a few guys that made it to the big leagues from that team, but it was just a phenomenal season, a phenomenal team. And the interesting thing is, being 52-17, we were 35 games over 500. And when we won the World Series, that was the first championship team that I had ever been on in professional baseball. 35 games over 500, not a bad year. And then in 1984, we started out the season 35-5. So it was interesting to me that 35, and that was the last team that I had ever been on that had won a championship. So it was interesting that 35 kept popping up. You know, after that year, and the Tigers drafting me, they actually drafted me as a third baseman. And was talking earlier that it was kind of curious that they told me when they drafted me they wanted me to play third base, because I had caught from the time I was in Little League all the way through high school. But I guess the times that the Tiger Scouts came to see me, I was playing third base. So they drafted me and told me they wanted me to play third base. So I was, okay, fine, whatever you want me to do. So I played third base. I made the All-Star team, even though I only hit .213. But I had some home runs, had some RBIs. After the season was over, I went to instructional ball, and our farm director, some of you might remember the name of Hoot Evers, came up to me in instructional ball, and he says, here's the deal. We want you to catch, so we're going to switch you from third base to catcher, and we want you to switch hit. And I was like, what? You know, I'd never switch hit in my life. Now, I was an 18-year-old kid. I had just turned 18 in the middle of June, you know, after I graduated from high school. And they drafted me as a third baseman, and then they moved me to catcher, which I was okay with, but they wanted me to switch hit, which I thought was interesting. So I went to Lakeland the next year, which was single A, and I battled my butt off to try to figure out how to hit left-handed. And Hoot Evers told me, if you could ever learn how to hit left-handed with that short porch in right field in Detroit, there's no telling how many home runs you would hit. Well, I never figured it out. I had a hard time pulling the ball, but towards the end of the season, I started finally coming around and starting to pull some balls and getting some lift on it. And when the season was over, he came up to me and told me, you're not switch hitting anymore. So I went from hitting right-handed and playing third base to catching and switch hitting to catching and just hitting right-handed. So my first 3 years were kind of, you know, little out of the ordinary. I went to Montgomery the next year, which was AA. We won the Southern League Championship that year, as I had mentioned. Les Moss was my manager. I've said this about Les Moss because he managed me in AA and AAA and was my manager in the big leagues for a few months before he was let go and Sparky Anderson was brought on. But I mentioned that Les Moss, if it wasn't for him, I would have never made it to the major leagues, I don't believe. I was struggling with my hitting, struggling catching, struggling with just about everything. And the one thing that I admired about Les was he seemingly, in my eyes, knew how to do everything. Always knew the right thing to say, always knew the right button to push. I had to start coming early to the ballpark. We played all night games. Montgomery, Alabama, it's so hot there in the summertime. And we played all night games. He had me come out every afternoon, every morning before afternoon at 10 o'clock and work on my hitting. And I would literally hit trash cans full of baseballs. One-handed drill with my backhand, my front hand, you know, soft toss hitting the other way, hitting off a curveball machine. I had to hit the ball up the middle. A lot of things that he emphasized, but I was there every day when we were at home working on my hitting. When we were on the road, I was working on my catching. And I remember one day he told me we were going to do some blocking drills in the batting cage. So he says to me, I'm going to crank this machine up, which was the jugs machine, throwing sliders, hard sliders. He goes, when I get this thing dialed up, I want you to get in there and we're going to start blocking some balls. I go, okay. So we get in, and I walk in with all my gear on, and I've got my glove, and he says, wait a minute. He goes, leave your glove out there. And I'm like, well, what do you mean, leave my glove out? He He goes, this is just what I said it was going to be. It's going to be blocking drills, not catching drills. He goes, you're going to learn how to get your body in front of the ball, which I did, because about the first half dozen that I tried to block hit me on my forearms. I had big welts all over my arms. And you can bet from then on, I was doing everything I could do to try to get my chest protector in front of that ball so it didn't wear me out. But that went from the AA season into AAA the next year, and they say timing is everything. My fourth year in professional baseball in AAA, I had a good year. I ended up hitting .279 with 25 home runs and 90 RBIs, and I was a September call-up to Detroit. And, the rest is history. I had a great time playing in the minor leagues, had some great instruction, was a part of some really good teams. In fact, one of your alumni, Ken Brochanski, and I played together in the minor leagues. In fact, he sent me an email letting me know that he was here in spirit, even though he's soaking up the sun down in Naples right now. One of the funny things that happened during the '84 season was in the World Series. And I don't know if any of you remember it, but we were playing out in San Diego, and Aurelio Lopez was pitching. Senor Smoke. So, as was usual, I had to look into the dugout every time somebody got on base, which is typical for most catchers anymore. Usually one of the coaches gives a throw-over sign or pitch-out sign or whatever. Roger Craig was amazing at calling pitch-outs, but I had to, every time somebody was on base, look into the dugout. So in this particular instance, Aurelio had come into the game late. He was the setup guy for Willie Hernandez at that time. And I think Gary Templeton was hitting, and they had a guy on first base that was pretty fast. I want to say it was Bobby Brown. I looked into the dugout, and Roger gave me the pitch out. So, the universal sign, the fist for the pitch out, I put the fist down, and, Lopez shook his head like he had gotten it. And I get down behind the plate, and he goes into his stretch, and as soon as he starts to get ready to deliver the ball, as you well know, when a catcher calls a pitch out, as soon as that catcher starts moving, I start moving out of where I'm positioned out into usually the other batter's box. So I start to jump out, and he lets go of the ball, and I'm out here, and I'm watching the ball, and it's looking like it's going right down the middle of the plate. So I went to reach for it, and then I pulled my glove back real quick, which was a good thing because Gary Templeton actually swung through the ball and missed it. Well, Larry Barnett was the umpire behind the plate, and like I said, the ball went right down the middle. I was standing over there, and it hit Larry Barnett right in the crotch, okay? So he folded up. I'm looking around for the ball. And, I get to the ball, and he's on the ground, and I was going to say something to him, and, I knew that he didn't want to talk to me. So I looked out at the mound, I'm looking at Lopi, and I was like, I was, doggone it. So I started walking out to the mound, and I probably got 10 feet away from him, and he knew that I was upset. So before I actually got to him, he looks at me, and he goes, I see the sign, I see the sign. He goes, I tried to throw the ball outside, it goes right down the middle. So I almost started laughing, to be honest with you. I was like, well, what am I going to say to that? So, things straightened itself out. We ended up getting back in the game. I tried to talk to Larry. He didn't want to talk to me. He was, pretty upset. So I get that. But ironically, we ended up winning the World Series. Everything was great. The next year in spring training, one of our very first spring games we played, we have our umpiring crew come out, and who's behind the plate? Larry Barnett. And I hadn't talked to him since, the World Series was over. And I was kind of thinking that he probably was still irritated. So, the first thing I did was I went up to him, I went to shake his hand, and I go, hey, I just want to apologize again for that, that pitch out the series. And he goes, hey, don't worry about it. He goes, actually, it worked out pretty good for me. And I go, well, how's that? And he goes, I do a little speaking, go on a little speaking tour during the off season. And he goes, that became my opening line for all my speaking things. He goes, I told everybody it's the first time I ever had a strike and 2 balls on the same pitch. And I said, "Oh, I'm glad I could help you out." So one other story I'd like to share with you before I get into what I'd really like to talk about is Jack Morris. You know, I love Jack Morris. Everybody asks me, if there's one guy that you could catch in a big game, who would it be? Jack Morris. You know, I've caught some great pitchers in my time. I caught Randy Johnson in Seattle, had a chance to catch Roger Clemens in the All-Star game one year. I think he struck everybody out. Had a pitching staff in California when I played for the Angels of Jim Abbott, Mark Langston, Bert Blyleven, Chuck Finley, and Kirk McCaskill. And we had Brian Harvey in the bullpen who nobody could touch. So that was a pretty good pitching staff. But nobody, in my eyes, matched the competitiveness of Jack Morris. I mean, when he wanted to buckle down, he was as tough as anybody out there. I guess the big problem for me was trying to keep him focused, you know, but what a great competitor. But anyway, when we were playing a game out in Oakland in the early 80s, this was before we won the World Championship in '84. In the early 80s, Billy Martin was the manager, and it was a day game. It was hot in Oakland. I want to say it was probably the second or third inning. A guy by the name of Wayne Gross, who played third base for them at the time, was on third base. Those of you that might remember Jack Morris when he pitched out of a windup, had a very slow, deliberate windup, big leg kick, all that. So I know Billy Martin is one of those guys that tries to take advantage of every situation. And I guess they had been talking about it. They had been watching Jack and talking about how slow he was at the plate. So all of a sudden, you know, we get out there and he's on third base. Jack goes to throw a pitch and he starts winding up, and here comes Wayne Gross. He's stealing home. So Jack tries to speed up his delivery, which he didn't do a very good job of, and Wayne had gotten such a great jump that he stole home pretty easily, okay? And it was embarrassing. We were losing the game at that point. After that happened, the wheels started coming off. We started making mistake after mistake. They were beating our brains out. Couple innings later, I'll say, you know, sixth inning, Dwayne Murphy's on third base, and Roger Craig comes out of the dugout. And he says something to Jack in this vein, which, you know, all of you that pay attention to baseball anymore, anytime there's a guy on third base, almost always the pitcher will pitch from a stretch. So Roger comes out to the mound, and he's, you know, trying to pump Jack up, and he goes, "I want you to pitch from a stretch." Jack goes, "I'm not pitching from a stretch." He goes, "This guy's not stealing home off of me, and I'm not pitching from a stretch." And I mean, this is our pitching coach. Roger goes, "Jack, proper thing to do here is for you to pitch from a stretch." He goes, "You know what? This guy's not going to steal home, and I'm not going to cave into them. I'm pitching from a windup, and he's not going to steal home." So I'm just sitting there listening to this going, "You got to be kidding me." So all of a sudden, Roger said, you know, something else, and he turned and walked off the mound. I'm looking at Jack like, "What's wrong with you?" So we go back. I go back behind the plate, put a sign down. Jack starts in his windup, and here comes Dwayne Murphy. Okay? So Jack tries to speed up again, and now he, you know, tries to speed up so much that he pulls the ball off the plate. He bounces it, one hops it on the outside part of the plate, skips off my glove, goes back to the backstop. I'm running around trying to get it. Dwayne Murphy scores. They steal home. All those guys over in the Oakland dugout are laughing at us, okay? So I come after we get the last out, I come into the dugout, and I'm hot. You know, it's like these guys, they're embarrassing us. Jack's making us look like a fool. He won't listen to anything he's being told. So when I walked into the dugout, I had my glove in my hand, and I went to throw it against the back wall of the dugout. Now in Oakland, there's a couple steps that go down into the dugout. It's not a real deep one, but there are a couple steps. So I come into the dugout, and I went to throw my glove. As soon as I let my glove go, you know, I went, "Oh no." Well, there was a pipe running down the wall, and it had a spigot on it. I hit that spigot with my glove, and it snapped it right off. And it was like a fire hydrant went off in our dugout. So not only are we getting our brains beat out, and they're embarrassing the heck out of us, and all of a sudden I've snapped this spigot off, and our dugout's filling up with water. And everybody's scrambling, you know, looking like a bunch of ants on an anthill when you put water on it, trying to get all their stuff and putting it on the bench and putting it on the, and Sparky is pissed, you know? So, lo and behold, we get the game over with, and we go into the clubhouse after the game, and Sparky, everybody sit down. We're going to have a little discussion. So he went around and just aired everybody out. Looking at so-and-so, and you know, and he'd lay into this guy, and you, and he'd lay into that guy, and then he kind of locked eyes with me, and he goes, and you. He goes, I'm fining you $500 because I'll be damned if I'm going to be swimming in my own dugout. So that's just, you know, some of the things that happen through the course of a season. You know, in 1984, when we started out 35-5, of all the great teams that I've heard about, and I always watch all these shows on ESPN and MLB Network, and they always talk about the greatest teams in history, I've yet to see a team that has bettered our 35-5 start, okay? A lot of times they didn't even mention the 84 Tigers when they were talking about some of the greatest teams in history. 35-5 start, wire-to-wire champions. We lost one postseason game. It's pretty impressive. You know, a common theme for a championship ball club is that, you know, we all pulled for one another. We all pulled for one another. We all pushed one another. We all held each other accountable. And I think we respected one another. I think everybody on that team during that season, and it was a great experience for me to be on a championship team like that, was because I got to see what it took to win a championship at that level. It took everybody buying in to, number one, what Sparky was trying to teach, but also buying into understanding what their role was and working at it and trying to be the best that they could be at their roles. Sparky Anderson came on board in June of 1979. As I told you, Les Moss was our manager for a short period of time. When Sparky became available, when the Reds fired him, you know, we were a team in transition then. We had some guys that had still played on the 68 World Championship team. Mickey Stanley was on our team. John Hiller was on our team when Sparky came in. But we were in the middle of a process of starting to eliminate some of the older guys and bringing in the younger talent. We had a very young nucleus of guys that all played together in the minor leagues, in myself, Tram, Lou, Gibby, Dan Petrie, Tom Brookins, you know, quite a few guys that were part of championship teams in our minor leagues that I think that intrigued Sparky when he looked at the players that we had in our system. I think that's one of the reasons why he was interested in coming over and managing in Detroit. But, you know, one of the things that he did when he came over was he laid down the law. He laid down the law. He basically set out to change the culture in our clubhouse and basically what our team was made of. When he came over, it was automatic from day one. As soon as he got there, he made the announcement, no more facial hair. Everybody had to shave their beards, mustaches, whatever they had. And you know, the one thing that I'll always remember is Aurelio Rodriguez had this big, beautiful, bushy mustache. And I thought he was going to start crying when Sparky told him that he had to shave his mustache off. But he had to do it. Everybody had to do it. So there's no more facial hair. We all had to wear suits and ties when we traveled. We had to look professional. And he had a thing that, I mean, if he mentioned it once, he mentioned it 1,000 times, that he believed in respect. He believed in respect. He didn't like bad people. He made that very evident to everybody. But in the respect factor, he said, you'll respect the guys that work in this clubhouse, the guy that runs the clubhouse. When the media comes in here, I want you to show them respect because they have a job to do as well. He said, I don't want to see any more clothes laying on the floor. He rolled out a big hamper in the middle of the floor, and he said, from now on, all your clothes go in that hamper. You know, I don't want to give the impression that we're a bunch of pigs, but basically we're a bunch of pigs. And when he came over, like I say, he made everybody aware of the fact that he wasn't going to tolerate that any longer. I think he set out on a course to try to shape and mold that team. Ironically, when he came over, he said that we would be world champions in 5 years, and it actually played out that way, which is amazing. So somewhat of a sage in that regard. So in one of his clubhouse meetings, he told guys that he wouldn't tolerate bad people. Let everybody know I have the authority to get you out of here if I don't like you, if I don't think you're good enough to play here, whatever the reason. He goes, I have the authority to move you. So I just want you to be aware of that. And he would always tell us a story, give us some type of an analogy. One of his favorite ones early on was he used to tell us about his garden that he grew in Thousand Oaks, California. When I go home in the off season, I have this beautiful garden that I tend and I take care of, and I grow my tomatoes and I grow my lettuce and I grow whatever plants he grows. And he goes, and these are my favorite plants. I love my garden. He goes, but every once in a while, he goes, a weed will pop up. He goes, and I just walk over and I pluck that weed right out of my garden. And he just sat there and stared at everybody. So after the meeting, I think everybody got the idea where he was going, and I think we all had a preference to be one of his favorite plants rather than that weed that was growing in the garden. He also told everybody another weed analogy. He says, you know, I don't weed players out. They weed themselves out. They weed themselves out by the way they conduct themselves, by the way they play. They don't work hard enough. They don't hustle. He says, you know, I don't have to do that. They do it to themselves. And I'll say this along those lines. The last 6 years I've been managing in the Tiger organization. For the first 4 years was in Erie, the AA team, and then last 2 years was in Grand Rapids in West Michigan. Every spring training, we have to go through a period where we make our cuts, which is very difficult, and I hate it, to be honest with you. It's very hard for me to look somebody in the eye when I'm managing or when I have managed and tell them that, you know, East or the Tigers are, giving them their papers, basically. It's very difficult because I've watched how hard these guys work. But in spring training, when we have our evaluation meetings, you know, trying to figure out who's going on what team sometimes becomes very difficult to figure out who we want to keep and who we don't want to keep. So for you players out there, what I'd like you to understand about professional baseball is it's not all about talent. It's about the kind of person you are. You know, we talk about things like, what kind of a person are you? Are you a good teammate? You have a good work ethic. You know, we can only keep so many guys. Our organization is looking for leaders, positive examples. And when it comes down to it, if we have two guys of equal talent, it always seems to come down to what type of person is this guy? How does he project out? You know, I found out that in the world of sports and the world of business, those in the position of leadership want people that can help them achieve their goals. They want to be successful and they want to win. So knowing that, you know, I guess I would ask myself, how should that motivate me? How would that motivate you? So I'll tell you how it motivated me when I played. Everybody is always asking me, what did you do? What did you used to do? And what I can honestly tell you is I worked my butt off. Maybe initially when I got out of high school, I could not really fathom, professional baseball. It was just another step in my life. I didn't really understand the significance of where I was at. But it came to me pretty quickly after my first year or so. And I saw what I was up against. I was tired of doing bad. My first 3 years in the minor leagues, I think I hit 213, 211, and 220. But they kept moving me up because I was a #1 draft pick, and I guess they saw something in me. And like I said earlier, I peaked at the right time. I had a good year in AAA and ended up at the end of the season being a September call-up, and I was able to stay in the big leagues from there. But prior to that, I felt like, I got to get my act together. So when I would go home, I would work out all the time. Back then, they didn't have gymnasiums, so to speak. They had a few of them sprinkled around, but nothing like they have now. In our minor league system, there was no such thing as weightlifting. When I got to the big leagues, there was hardly anything that we did concerning weightlifting. And if you did it, it was basically on your own. My wife can attest that when we got married, I hate to say this, but I brought a dumbbell with some weights on our honeymoon. I was a fanatic about it. But you know what? I didn't want anybody to take my job. So when I went home, my regiment, as soon as I got home, was to try to be that much further along than where I had left the previous season. I ran, I lifted. I probably ran between 3 and 4 miles a day, and then I lifted for a couple hours after I got done running, and she can vouch for that. I used to drive her crazy because I was always out doing that. But you know what? I felt compelled to do it, especially since I was married and we had children. When I got to the big leagues, I didn't want anybody taking my job. And the reality of it is every year they have a new draft, new guys come in, there's new blood in the organization, they want to take your job. I wasn't going to let that happen. I used to bring some weights with me when I was in AA. I used to throw them on the bus, underneath the bus, so that, when we get to the hotel, I could work out and do my push-ups and all the other stuff. And one day, our manager, Les Moss, saw me throwing my weights on the bus, and he made me throw them off, and, that was the end of that. So I was always fighting with somebody about lifting. When I got to Detroit, I lifted. Sparky came along, I lifted. He started wearing me out. I brought my own weights to spring training because we didn't really have any. I had an Olympic bar with Olympic weights. I had the ground crew there make me a bench where I could lift and do my stuff. Put it in the back room where he couldn't see it. But one day he walked by and saw it in there, and he told our clubhouse manager, Jim Schmakel, "You throw these weights in the middle of Lake Park or I don't want to see them anymore." So it was one of those deals where it didn't matter what I did, I was always getting busted and turned in the other direction. But, I was not to be denied. And I kept doing it. So one year, in 1982, I probably finished the season, and I want to say I weighed close to 230 pounds. Sparky came up to everybody, he told everybody at the end of the season, everybody's going to have a reporting weight when they come to spring training next year. For every pound you're over, it's going to cost you $100. Back then, $100 is, $100 is $100. So I went home and I worked out like an absolute maniac. But I didn't tell you when I left, he told me my reporting weight was 220. And I was like, I just caught the whole season I didn't weigh 220. You want me to come in and weigh 220? He goes, well, I'm just telling you, I think you'll be more agile, more mobile, more athletic. I think it'll be better for you. 220, and I go, well, I'm thinking to myself, that ain't happening. There's no way. And I went home and probably worked out harder than I ever worked out in my life. And when I got to spring training, they had the weigh-in. I got on the scale, I weighed 248. But I never heard one thing from Sparky. He never said anything directly to my face, but he had a few things to say in the paper. He thought I was too big, thought I was too muscle-bound, thought I was going to be too tight. Well, Well, that year I went out and hit 32 home runs and set a home run record for catchers in the American League, which, you know, after that had happened, the question was posed to him again, and he goes, well, you know, I'll just say this, it's not for everybody. So fast forward, I left the Tigers in '86 and went to Philadelphia and went a few other places, and that's a whole story in itself. But I came back to the Detroit Tigers in 1994 for spring training. And when I showed up in camp, I walked in the clubhouse and I walked through a door and they had a Gold's Gym attached to the side of the clubhouse. So it went from when I left, they weren't allowed to do anything, to all of a sudden they had the biggest weight room I'd ever seen attached to the clubhouse. Well, when Bo Schembechler came over, he changed the whole culture in that regard. He hired a guy, we were talking earlier about the strength and conditioning coach, a guy by the name of Brad Andrus, that ran all the strength and conditioning for the Tigers. But I will say this, so you go back to when I started, there was no weightlifting, not at the major league level or the minor league level. Now, you look at every organization in baseball, okay? Every minor league team that's a part of every organization in baseball, every minor league team has its own strength and conditioning coach, and every minor league, most every minor league, I would have to venture and say every minor league stadium has a weight room. And if there's not a weight room, they go out and schedule lifting at facilities around the cities. So all I have to say is thank you very much. You know, I fought with Sparky tooth and nail, and now everybody in baseball is lifting weights, and we have the biggest, most beautiful weight room, and you just mentioned the weight room you guys have. We have a beautiful weight room in spring training, a beautiful weight room at Comerica Park. All of our affiliates have weight rooms. So it's come a long way. You know, my belief was, I knew I wasn't ever going to outrun anybody, but I could dang sure be stronger than everybody. And I knew if I did it the right way and I stayed flexible, that, you know, that it was only going to benefit me. So, you know, I became a big believer in it. When I was working out, I had a wrist machine that I bought. You know, it was a hydraulic wrist machine. And it had a sticker on the side of it that, you know, when I was working out, and I didn't put it on, the company that sold it had it on there. But the sticker on it said, the more you do with what God gave you, the more he'll give you to do it with. And I firmly believed in that. I firmly believed that the more that I worked and the harder I worked, the better that I was going to be. And I applied that, and the reason that I applied that, because I wanted to be the very best baseball player that I could be. And I wanted to be the biggest contributor that I could be to the Detroit Tigers. You know, I love the simplicity and the enormity, really, of the statement when, and I'm sure some of you have heard it, when Bill Belichick asks one thing of his players, and I would imagine his coaches, he just says, do your job. Do your job. You know, we're individuals, but we make up a team. If every individual would take it upon himself to do everything he could do to make himself the very best he could be, collectively, the team is going to be a really good team. That's the way I look at it. Individually, if we commit ourselves to be the best, like I said, then collectively as a team, we become a force to be reckoned with. And I also wanted for you guys to just think about something. As you go about your job, you prepare for your job, the things that you do, not only on the baseball field, in the classroom, in life, our actions define us. Our work ethic defines us, and our character defines us. In fact, Bill DeJoy, who was our general manager when I was playing in '84, he was a scouting director for the Tigers. He actually started out playing, became worked his way into the front office, became a scouting director, and then he became the general manager of the Tigers. He was responsible for putting together that '84 team. He was the guy that initially started drafting all the guys that were drafted. starting with myself in 1974. He drafted me, Tram, Lou, Gibby, all those guys, Jack. He wrote a book before he passed away a couple years ago. The title of it is called Character is Not a Statistic. He always talked about that, talent is great, but there's something more to each individual. When he would go around and talk to guys that he was scouting that stood out to him and made more of an impact on him, and it was more about their character than the numbers that they put up on the board. As I mentioned in how we work in our minor league system, that's the thing that we probably look for most in individuals. We're always looking for somebody to be a leader. We're always looking for somebody to take charge. We're always looking for somebody that has that character about them that we can depend on to kind of guide other guys through. But just imagine if you had more than one guy. Just imagine if you all took it upon yourselves to be that person of character and that leader, how far more advanced your team would be. I think the question that all of us should ask ourselves is, how do I want people to think of me, and how do I want to be defined? I asked myself that. When I was managing, I used to tell my players, every time you go out on the field, everything you do is being watched by either the fans or scouts or the opposing players or guys on your own team. I said, and when they watch you go about your business, they watch you go about your job, they form an opinion of you. They form an opinion of you. Is this guy, does he compete? Does he hustle? Does he play the game hard? Does he play the game the way it's supposed to be played? I actually had one of our scouts, Donnie Kelly, who's now a coach with the Pittsburgh Pirates. When I was managing in Double A, I asked him to come in and talk to our players. And I said, please tell them, as a scout, what you look for when you're watching these guys every day. He goes, I watch for who's got talent, but the thing that I also watch for, and is very important to me and everybody else, is how do you play the game? How do you compete? Our position players, he told them, every time you run down to first base, you should run at 100% clip. He goes, it's very difficult for me to evaluate you as a player if you hit a ground ball or a fly ball and you just jog down to first base. He goes, I have to basically turn in an incomplete report on you or give you a lower evaluation than I would want to. So I guess what I'm saying to you guys is that just like you've heard many guys say throughout your career, hustling takes absolutely no talent. Takes no talent. And believe me, everybody's watching. We have those meetings in spring training, and trust me, they're serious. There's some guys that they wear some guys out in those meetings. And it's probably more out of frustration. Because as coaches, we try to teach you and push you and encourage you to be the best that you can be, knowing that if you want to be at the top of the mountain, if you want to be a professional baseball player, you want to play in the big leagues, you want to stay in the big leagues and be a star, that's very important. That's very important. And as I've told guys as well, once you've been labeled as a player, it's very hard to shake that label. If somebody tells, some of the coaches that I had this guy all year and he's lazy, he is so lazy, he doesn't work with it, it's very hard to shake that label. So I would ask you to not even go there. I know I've been up here for a while, so in closing, based on my experience, I would encourage you to consider, number one, being a great friend. Being a great friend on your team. Being a great teammate. Being an encourager. in addition to being an encourager, I can tell you this. I had guys like Kirk Gibson and Alan Trammell and Jack Morris come up to me when I didn't have a very good game offensively, but they praised me for what I did behind the plate. Try to find a reason to pump somebody up on your team. We've always said in our game that a pat on the back goes a long way, and I would encourage you to take advantage of that. You know, you see when a guy's down, you see when a guy's struggling and going through a difficult time. Pat on the back goes a long way. Go out of your way to pump them up. Be that guy. Be that guy that doesn't mind going up and helping your teammate out. So be an encourager and be prepared. And then in the end, do your job. Just like Bill Belichick espouses, do your job. And the one thing that I wanted to leave you with was this. You know, there's a scripture in the Bible, and I've seen it more and more times that I go to different clubhouses hanging on the wall. It's Proverbs 27:17. And in my mind, it emphasizes the important role that we all play in each other's lives. Proverbs 27:17 simply says this, is iron sharpens iron, so when one man sharpens another. You know, we're part of a team, we're part of a family. We build each other up, we encourage one another, we sharpen each other. I know you guys are starting your season in a few days. I'm heading to spring training tomorrow. Baseball season is here, and I want you to know that I wish you nothing but the best of luck. I know you've got a great leader. I work with his dad all the time. He's a great man, and he is a great leader as well. I've learned a lot from him. We should be very proud of him because he is a great man. Eric and Jonathan, AJ, guys that I've been able to rub elbows with a little bit throughout my years. I wish you guys nothing but the best of luck. And I'll be following you. I'll be following you. I know your season, like you say, starts on Friday. So, again, I wish you nothing but the best of luck, and I thank you for the opportunity to talk.
That was great. Thank you, Lance. Before we conclude tonight's program, we have some final notes. A few thank yous are in order. So let's give a round of applause for Charlie Richter, Kathy Snyder, and the EMU Baseball Diamond Club. Their efforts in planning and organizing tonight's conference. All right, now current EMU baseball players are starting to make their way to the long tables outside of the ballroom near the coach check and signing area. We'll have team posters available for everyone near the tables. Please take one. Take the opportunity to get an autograph by the players if you wish. The silent auction will remain open momentarily for you to place your final bid. Charlie Richter will take the podium now to make an announcement for last call for silent auction items and announcing the winning tickets for raffles. On behalf of myself, I want to thank you for having me tonight. This has been a complete joy. Thank you very much. Charlie?
Thank you, Tom. You guys take this time to